a very personal introduction. We met a long time ago in the I'm not sure I can place it all, 1980s. And he came to a conference of early CD-ROM innovators, interactive innovators, to a Markle Foundation funded seminar, which was really fabulous. And that's when I met him. And the thing that struck me the most about him at the time was what a great, wonderful, nice person he was. And considering all of his accomplishments at the time, he was a BBC producer of groundbreaking and award-winning science documentaries, and pretty well known at that point, and doing all this new stuff. I thought that's really fabulous. Later, I met his family, his wife, his kids, his mother. I went into business with his mother. We became friends over a long period of time. His kids gave up their bedroom for me when I came to London. And we went through a lot of things together. There was a point at which he was on his deathbed, and we just wondered if he was going to make it through. And he did. The thing about Max is that he knows how to reincarnate. He's amazing in the kinds of things he's done. He got a PhD in nanotechnology, well, chemistry technically, but really nanotechnology from Imperial College, which I was really amazed at. And he was like graduate student of the year at the time. I mean, it was everything he does fabulously. And I've been really honored to be his friend and sometimes collaborator. He and Douglas Adams did this fabulous CD-ROM for Voyager a long time ago, Last Chance to See, which was about endangered species around the world. Douglas Adams had taken this trip around the world, and Max helped make it into this fabulous, innovative, at the time, very innovative. It had all kinds of elements, video and audio and text and everything, and it was wonderful, and I've always loved it. But collaborator is one of the hats he's worn. Business partner, he always figures out, okay, this isn't working, what else can we do? And he's does this wonderful naturalist stuff too that I like to look at. So I am introducing Max Whitby. I'm so honored to have you each meet each other, because I love the Duster Magic community as well. Max.
Well, thank you, Aleen, very much indeed for that generous introduction. And thank you, Warren, and everybody who's been organizing this event. It is wonderful to be here and a great spirit. And I hope I can do justice to this evening and this location and this setting. I'd like to talk a little bit about history, and I'd like to go back a bit on my involvement with interactive media and try and draw out some reflections which are even more relevant today than they were at the time, because I think we're in a very exciting period of cultural change, and what we're doing, making apps, and especially making apps for young minds, is a really important and exciting thing to be doing. And it's right at the heart of our culture, and it's getting a lot of attention. And I think everybody in this room has a part to play in a very fast-moving transformation of the way we communicate with one another. I'm very fortunate to be CEO of a company in London called Touch Press. For the last 3 years, we've been having a wonderful time making apps about things we enjoy and are excited by. And last Thursday, we woke up and had a look at iTunes, and it was one of those marvelous days. I'm sure there's many of you in the room who've experienced it, when your app is editor's choice in China, in this case. And I heard this morning in Turkey, and I believe in a place called the US, and it's very nice when that happens, and God bless Apple. A good location to be saying that, I suppose. But it's a kind of serendipitous thing, because I knew a long time ahead that I was going to be coming here to talk a little bit about the history of my involvement in interactive media. And I had always planned to begin with this, which is, how many people here ever have seen this or played it?
Love it.
Actually, maybe a little bit more light would be good on the audience if it could be gently arranged, because I hope this will be an interactive discussion. Well, Aleen, with typical modesty, didn't mention the fact, but she started a company called the Voyager company, which did really absolutely groundbreaking work in interactive media, and a lot of what's happening today, I think, you can sort of trace the intellectual history going back. And certainly the Beethoven title that we've just published, as by the way we certainly acknowledge in the credits in the title, owes a lot to this groundbreaking hypercard stack that was published in 1988 or 1989, I think, and we'll see a little bit more about that in a moment. At the time it came out, I was working at the BBC. I spent about 10 years there as a filmmaker, making science films mainly. I think the favorite film I ever got to make was with these two gentlemen. On the left is Douglas Adams. On the right is Tom Baker, the fourth Doctor Who, for those of you who follow Doctor Who. I had the great privilege to be a friend of Douglas and to work with him for a period of 3 or 4 years at that time. And he died, as I'm sure many of you know, tragically young. But he lived in 2013 and in all the things that are happening to us today. And he saw everything that was coming. And it's so sad that he's not here to enjoy it and appreciate it, I think. Anyway, the film that we made was Douglas's vision of today. And it was made before the internet. It was made before there was any browser at all. Very strange to put oneself back in that period. And so what we tried to do in the film is realize Douglas's imagination, and frame by painful frame, we kind of created things that now we'll look at and just totally take for granted. And one of the things we'll look at, bottom right, is Robert Winter. And there's a little part of the program, because this amazing hypercard stack on Beethoven's Ninth Symphony had just come out. And so one of the things we did in the film was to go and show work that was going on around the world that was kind of related to this concept of interactive digital information. And so let me just play a short part. I hope the sound will work. And here we go.
Ah, here's a shape for you. What do you think it looks like? It looks like an alpine mountain range with a river, a flock of birds flying over it, some more birds down there, a few clouds. Do you want to hear it? Hear it? It's the opening of Bach's Fugue in C minor. Shapes and sounds so well, it might be a very good way of studying music. One of the problems with music is that you can't actually see the structures, though you know they're there. Oh, you're way ahead of me again, Aleen. Not just me. There's an American professor of music called Robert Winter who published an interactive version of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in 1989 to help people see its structure.
Beethoven's Ninth Symphony exhibits a very profound structure. Music is structure over time, and in one sense, this is the natural flow of life, which after all takes place in time. But this also creates great obstacles for the listener, because unlike a painting, for example, Picasso's Guernica, where you can take in the entire canvas at one look and focus on that portion which you wish to study or peruse, with music you haven't got that liberty. However, imagine that we were able to freeze time and to create, as it were, a kind of picture of the piece, as here. And here we have, for example, the various movements, all 4 of them, portions of the movements, the exposition, development, recapitulation, and so forth, and that we can at will, for example, take on any of them. Unlike any composer before him, rather than presenting us with a full-blown theme, Beethoven takes us back to the very process of creation. We kind of come out of this void. And this little unit of energy, a tatam figure, which is all there is there at this hushed beginning, grows gradually in intensity. And little by little, it's as if we're watching the 20-year growth of a mighty oak tree compress into 40 seconds, so that finally it just bursts out of the texture and explodes.
So you'll see at the end of this talk, I'll show you what we've done on the iPad in 2013, and we've basically just shamelessly ripped off the great ideas that you had a long time ago. Of course, at that point, it was impossible to put video into, what's the word, a program, a stack, not an app. And it was impossible to even really have running audio synchronized reliably. So in that film extract you saw, we kind of created much of what we've sort of been able to realize today with the wonderful device and channel that the iPad is. Now, at the time Voyager was working away with Robert Winter, I was working in London with a really interesting secret part of the BBC called the Interactive Television Unit. And it had been set up by Peter Armstrong, who's sitting in the front there with very 1980s glasses on. Peter's an extraordinary man, and when the history of Dust or Magic gets to be written again, Peter will certainly figure in it. And it was a secret part of the BBC because he managed to keep it secret from the bosses, I think, and set up this unit of about 20 or 30 people that published the first interactive media project in the world, certainly the first that I'm aware of. And it went out to thousands of schools, and it was a kind of portrait of Britain it had crowdsourcing, millions of people took part and sent in photographs as slide films by post. It was incredibly ahead of its time, a really interesting project to look up if you want to find out where we all came from. But anyway, I joined it after the Doomsday Project when it was in a kind of difficult period because it became extremely clear that the market was at least 10 years, if not 20 years away.
And so the BBC accountants had finally got wind of the fact that this unit existed and were determined to close it down. Meanwhile, I'd been brought in because I had an Apple, and I loved what Apple was doing at the time, although Apple was going through a bad patch, I think it's true to say. And they had a secret group, kind of equivalent in Sacramento, in Pacific Heights, Sacramento Street in San Francisco. This is a multimedia lab. Anyone here passed through its doors in the time? Yeah, a few people. Anyway, you'll know, those of you who were there, that it was an extraordinarily interesting place where a number of very visionary people in Apple, I think supported by Alan Kay, decided to look at what it might mean for Apple in the future when it will be possible to actually have video and sound integrated with interaction on the machine. And again, it's really hard to put oneself back into that time when these things weren't kind of just obvious. But at that point, it was a big thing to think about. And here's the introduction in the film from Christina Hooper, who was the director of the lab.
We're trying to explore the area of multimedia. The idea is that in the computing environment, you have images and sounds, and you want to think about what you can do with those. You want to think about what you can make with them. You want to think about what you can understand with them. And we're finding the rules for doing that.
Yeah, so a mission statement that sounds totally banal today, but was really a revolutionary, visionary thing to think of at the time. There was no such thing as a video file. So I ran a collaboration between the BBC and Apple for a year or so. Didn't lead to any kind of commercial product, but it was a hell of a lot of fun. And there were other projects going on between Apple and Lucasfilm, Apple and WGBH, Apple and National Geographic. whole set of projects which led to a lot of really interesting early work in new media. And for us in the BBC group, it gave us really the energy to spin out. So we did a management buyout. We took that group out of the BBC. The BBC kept a 20% shareholding in the company. And we set up a wonderful company in London. For 7 years, was very like Voyager, I think, and was kind of a dress rehearsal for Touch Press in my thinking about my life. And it was in the days of CD-ROM, a dreadful medium. I still remember how incomprehensible it was to think I wanted to fill a CD-ROM. It was so big. But unfortunately, it was not a happy user experience. Nobody really wanted to snuggle up on the sofa with a massive computer. And you had to print the thing just like books, and you had to store them in warehouses, and if you made a title that didn't sell, it was a financial catastrophe. I'm sure all of you here believe in that and know that. But it was great fun, and we had a wonderful trajectory. A lot of really talented people came through that company. A lot of them went on to do interesting things. And we had an IPO. We were one of the first companies to float on the stock exchange in London called AIM, which was a bit like NASDAQ, for smaller companies. So we had a great time. I then had a very dramatic kind of change in my life due to waking up one day in hospital having had a road accident I didn't remember. And I was on an island in the North Sea, which gets cut off by the tide twice a day, called Lindisfarne, early island of Lindisfarne, recovering from this catastrophic accident. And I was walking around the island, or hobbling around the island, and I suddenly thought that two things really. One, that I really, really wanted not to make films about science, but actually to be a scientist and to properly train as a scientist, because my first degree was in philosophy, the art of bullshit. So I decided I would actually go back to school and study to be a scientist. And the second thing I wanted is, for some reason, I wanted a box with every element on the periodic table in it. And now Google existed. It was 2002. And so I typed periodic table set box collection, and I looked. And to my astonishment, there was only one Russian company which had produced this in the history of mankind, as far as I could tell, and it had gone bust for reasons which I now fully understand, but at the time I didn't. And so I said, right, this is a fantastic business opportunity. I'm going to set up a business to produce a box with every element in the universe in it. Well, eBay had just come onto the scene at about that time, and so eBay was a marvelous sweet shop where you could get all the elements. In the good old days, you could even get uranium. But there was a snag. And the snag was that whenever I found a really particularly choice X bit of nuclear bomb, there was always this person in Illinois who would outbid me at the very last moment. And he discovered E-snipe. I don't know about E-snipe, then it's the explanation, but this was the man. A fellow called Theodore Gray. And some of you, I think, were sitting in this very location, so to speak, last year and heard Theo speak. And anyway, I decided that there's much more in life to be gained by collaborating and partnering than there is by competing. And this has been a very important lesson in life, and it's certainly something we put into practice in Touch Press. So, to cut a long story short, I jumped on a plane and I got to meet Theo, and he and I have an awful lot of things in common. One of them obviously being a completely irrational love of periodic table elements. But also, our day job was kind of doing software and interactive media. In Theo's case, for Wolfram Research, a company I founded with Stephen Wolfram about 20 years ago, and he's head of software. He was the head of software interface design there for many years. Both Teo and I also had a long connection with Apple because Mathematica and the software that Wolfram Research produced was something that Steve Jobs quite often liked to show in his keynotes. So Teo knew Steve a little bit and would appear on Steve Jobs' keynotes from time to time, and Wolfram and Apple had a good connection. I'm telling you all this because it kind of feeds into how TouchPress got to be. But I think there's probably more than half of you who didn't meet Teo last year, so I thought I'd play you a short video that in 30 seconds will give you a very good idea of the sort of person he is. It's a real insight into his mind. And it's 30 seconds because it's a response to a competition when you had to explain how to do something difficult in exactly 30 seconds. And here it is. How to light a grill in 30 seconds. That's the end of bread.
After that, your charcoal is pretty much good to go.
Anyway, in 2002, Teo's extraordinary character was acknowledged with an Ig Nobel Prize. For those of you who don't know, this is a prize given to you by a real actual Nobel Prize-winning scientist, and it's for something that makes you laugh, but then makes you think. And what Teo won it for is the piece of furniture he's sitting at, which is a periodic table. And he built this out of a whole series of beautiful hardwoods. And that's the Ig Nobel Prize behind him on the cabinet. You can see it's a pair of false teeth on a little podium. And he claims that he didn't realize that a periodic table wasn't in fact a table, but I don't know if I believe him. Anyway, over the course of the following couple of years, with help from me here and there, Teo built up this extraordinary collection of objects which were designed to go into the little tiles. And here they are carefully taken out of the tiles and put on top of the tiles. Because if you lift each of the tiles on the table up, there's a compartment underneath. Well, unfortunately, the compartment was a bit too small, so he then had to get a series of museum cabinets for what is in fact his office there. And this now has extended to an enormous warehouse full of stuff. Pretty quickly, I think in 2003, Teo and I decided that we should put this collection to good use. And the wonderful folks at DePauw University, just down the road from where Teo's farm is in Illinois, DePauw, I think, is in Indiana, invited us, having heard of Teo and come across his website, periodictabletable.com, invited us to come and build for them a periodic table for their wonderful new science building. So I flew out to America again, and in the space of, I think, 2 weeks, with very, very little sleep, we built this periodic table. And it started life as a series of cherry planks in Teo's farm shop, and in the end, it's extremely beautiful. This is an identical one, I should just say, for accuracy, that we built later and had the foresight to photograph. I don't think we ever had any consciousness left at the end of building the previous one. But each cell in the periodic table is a kind of little 6-inch by 6-inch tableau, carefully arranged with, of course, lumps of the element, but also examples of how the element's used in our world. And the reason I fundamentally like the periodic table is because it's a window into our civilization. And there's so many stories around it. And we've now made about 50 of these things as a hobby. And as our main lives have increasingly been disturbed, it's a black day indeed when a new order for one of these displays comes in. You have to make it. This is the biggest one we ever made. It's about 20 feet tall It's in Philadelphia, and it is open to the public if ever you're in Philadelphia, although you have to sort of apply in writing beforehand, I think, to the Chemical Heritage Foundation next to the Ben Franklin Museum. And it's this is an absolutely marvelous further piece of Teo's inventive genius. It's 18 high-definition screens on their side, mosaicked together, driven by 3 Mac Pro towers, each stuffed with every slot full of video cards with multiple video heads. And this is what Teo created to put onto it. We call it the Tears of Mendeleev. And you might, if you squint, be able to recognize the features of the great Russian inventor of the periodic table there. And in fact, his face is made up of several thousand videos. And each video has an average brightness, which Teo has mapped. If you go to Philadelphia, you can actually walk up to this 18-foot tall screen, and every one of those videos falling down is actually sort of clear enough to see and watch the video that's going on. And if any of you have ever used Final Cut Pro or Avid, you'll know that that's not an easy video to edit. Anyway, what happens to it is that after a while, those videos fall down, and they make up a periodic table at the bottom of the screen. And these videos are essentially the summary of Teo and my spare time for about 4 years, when we filmed dangerous experiments involving every one of the elements. When it's an 8-minute, 10-minute cycle, it's like I suppose it's a public work of art. And each of these videos comes up, and it's now going to get very noisy, so I'll have to shout. But you can see the hydrogen bubbles at the top. So this is demonstrating the flammability of hydrogen. And just below, I think Teo is filling some helium, just to demonstrate that it floats. And I think, excitingly, he's pouring in number 7 some liquid nitrogen into his lake. And then I'll just run it for a little bit and you'll kind of get the idea. The one to watch is sodium, number 11. We start with a small bit of sodium, and then we go to a bit the size of your fist. And you notice the delay between the sodium going in and the bang? Watch again. This is with a really big... This is a great one here, number 17 chlorine. What we're doing there is squirting chlorine gas into a saucepan of molten sodium. And there's a violent reaction. And there's white smoke that comes out. And you'll see Teo take a plate of spaghetti and run through the smoke. Because, of course, sodium and chlorine makes salt. So, by 2010, we were sitting on this pile of stuff to do with the periodic table. Teo, after a year of cunning negotiation, managed to get a very good URL, and we had thousands of these objects that we'd photographed and spinning around for the table and so on. And Teo had written a book, which was doing quite well. I think he sold about 70,000 copies of it by January of 2010. And some of you may recognize the appearance because in January of 2010, Steve came down from the mountain and announced that the iPad would be coming. And we sort of put a lot of things together and realized that this was an amazing opportunity to take all the stuff and the stories and the resources that we had for the periodic table And we had 60 days, we knew, before the iPad would ship in April or late March. And so we decided to cancel everything and see if we could make something that both of us really believed was going to be wonderful on this device, an interactive book about the elements. And we talked about Douglas Adams and his sad absence. I would say the same for Steve Jobs, an extraordinary vision. And I think this quote from him is a particularly apt one for this audience and this occasion. It is the fusion of art and science, I think, of technology and storytelling and an understanding of how to excite children that is the great opportunity here. I'm not going to go into much detail or even show you the elements. I think Theo did that pretty thoroughly when he spoke on this platform, but it was a transformative thing for those of us involved, and it's now sold over $3 million net revenue to us from it, and it's wonderful when something in your life goes as well as that, and it makes, I think, if you're blessed with something fortunate like that, your obligation is to use that success to do something even better. And so we decided immediately, we realized the elements was a big deal, to form a company. And I'm proud to say I thought of the name Touch Press, which I think is a good name. I think our logo needs revisiting, but the name's good. And we joined forces with two long-standing former colleagues. In Theo's case, Stephen Wolfram, co-founder of Wolfram Research, a very interesting fellow indeed, a person behind Wolfram Alpha, one of the technologies that underlies Siri, by the way. And I should have said when we saw Tom Baker back in Hyperland in that film I showed earlier on, that of course he was being a kind of annoying Siri, that Douglas had foreseen that this would come. And then in the left of screen is John Crony, wonderful friend of many years. Aleen, you know John well, an Irish software designer, worked for Apple for a while in the QuickTime team, but he and I have run a natural history publishing company for many years. And in fact, we produced apps. So that was another question, case of being in the right place at the right time. We'd made apps. So when the iPad was announced, it wasn't a big leap really to go from the iPhone, which they've been running on hitherto, to the iPad. And Touch Press has now grown to almost 30 people. We're based in London. This is our office outing to celebrate the publication of Orchestra and Beethoven's Ninth. So this was last week in Paris. And on all the metros were the Apple posters for the iPad, and I think there's 4 of our apps featured on there. And it's incredibly exciting for that group of people to go and see their work in such a public way. And I think it's not just the thrill of seeing yourself on a poster, it's the sense that the work we are doing, and I'm talking now not about me and my colleagues, but about everybody here, is right at the heart of where our culture is changing fastest. It's very exciting. We've published 15 apps in the 3 years that Touch Press has been in business. We followed, predictably perhaps, the elements with Solar System, another scientific title, and we've done several other science titles too. But we surprised everybody quite early on, maybe following a bit of inspiration from that quote from Steve Jobs, by publishing a title on T.S. Eliot's great poem, The Wasteland. And people often say, why no, how come a bunch of science geeks should trespass into the hallowed territory of poetry? Well, I think The Elements and The Wasteland are very similar apps. Both of them take difficult, important subjects that people don't understand and are slightly intimidated by, and they make them accessible. And that really is the mission statement for Touch Press. We are in the enlightenment business. We try and tackle subjects in a way that makes them accessible to people from beginners right the way through to really knowledgeable people. And I hope in a few of the things I'll show you, especially the music titles we've just published. I hope I can demonstrate that. So we've had a very interesting trajectory. We've sold about $6 million of apps over the time we've been in business, very international. We sell about 45% of our titles here in the US, but Japan is our second biggest market. We translate all our stuff. The UK is, I think, only the fourth biggest market for us. We sell in Europe a lot. What do we look for in an app? Well, I think a good author, just as with publishing books, is number one on my list. And I use author in the broadest sense. I think authors don't have to be people who write words. Authors can be Esa-Pekka Salonen, the conductor and artistic director of the Philharmonia Orchestra. It was his editorial spirit in the orchestra app that we made that drove it. And I think every app needs to have a voice, certainly the apps that we make, the kind of titles that we do. In these early days, you have to be international. You have to have subjects that are going to sell this year and next. And the great unsolved marketing mystery, I completely agree with everything you said, is how to make your apps sell not just in the wonderful week when they're editor's choice around the world, but in the second month and the third month and the second year, and just keep them going. And nobody knows how to do it. It's a fantastic, difficult challenge. Most of the apps that Touch Press produces are partnerships, in partnership with others. We do that for several reasons. It allows us to punch above our weight. It allows us to get real access to expertise and experience from someone who knows a subject very well. And it also often brings with it a brand and some kind of way into the market through an audience that partner may have a connection with. So choose your partners well and carefully, but I think partnership is a very good model. And we've got a very good way of sharing investment and sharing returns with our partners. I won't go into it now, but if there's time for discussion at the end and people want to know about the model, I'm very happy to talk about it. So we also need, for any title that we publish, a way to get to market. I know from the panel that you had earlier and from Bjorn's talk that that's something that's very familiar to many of you, how important marketing is. And then the last two things are really important. One is that I think the interaction needs to be meaningful. And by that I mean that there is a reason to put this title onto an iPad or a tablet rather than make it in a printed book. You've got to offer your reader more than they can get any other way. And I talked about delivering enlightenment. That's what our apps need to do. Now, Theo, when he came to talk last year, studiously avoided talking about any of our apps aimed at children. So I thought I'd very swiftly remedy that by quickly showing you a little bit of from three of them. And I'm not going to, try and do a marketing pitch for them. What I want to do is just pull out from each one that meaningful interaction bit to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So X is for X-ray. This is a children's app we produced a year and a half ago. It's an alphabet. And let me choose a thing. And it has the Touch Press trademark rotations in it. So it's always very unsatisfactory, I think, showing apps on a big screen. You have to imagine a huge finger moving left and right on there. So you have the nice experience of rotating things. Theo is obsessional about these rotations and insists on them being done very, very carefully with a lot of quite clever software in to handle deceleration and so on. It's not as easy as it seems. You can pinch zoom and I think rotate them at any size, which is nice. But the magic happens when you stroke your finger up and down. because it goes through to X-ray, and you can still rotate the object in X-ray. So it's a really simple thing, but if you're a child trying to understand how your robot might work, and you're interested in all the cogs and gears and everything, there's a sort of magic. And of course you can do it halfway and then have a bit of both. So it's very simple. And Warren, I know you like the engine, so I'm going to show you the engine. And here there's a bit of point to the magic. You can see all the things going through. We did a dinosaurs title because we felt we had to. The thing I quite like in this one is it does have storytelling at its heart. It was based on a film produced for National Geographic.
Depuis plusieurs jours, Scar n'a eu pour compagnie que la silhouette décharnée du Quetzalcoatlus, traçant des cercles paresseux dans le ciel.
You can see,
le jeune Edmontosaur est parvenu
you might even learn a bit of French by watching this. And you can tap the text anywhere and the narration will follow.
Que son cœur se met à accélérer, ses sens alertés par une
and you turn the page and it kind of leads you through the story. It's a conventional storybook, nothing dramatic. I think one thing that's quite nice is the rotations of the dinosaurs that designed for children to play with, and as well as rotations in 2D. We have some dinosaurs. This was quite a new technology for us that we texture mapped, and so you can tickle its tummy, and it should roar. It's also got some nice video clips. These relate to the story, and they kind of illustrate the bit of the story that you've been reading at that point. The most successful children's title we've done is in partnership with Barefoot Books, a company based in Massachusetts and in London, in Oxford. It's done, I think, about 120,000 paid downloads now. So it's well into profit, which is a good thing, because not all our titles are. And the sort of core interaction for this one is the ability, and again, you need to kind of look at me, not the big screen, but it's trying to give to a child the magic of exploring and rotating a physical globe. And there's a lovely soundtrack that changes depending on the part of the world you're in. It's very painterly. It's kind of an antidote to Google Earth. And I'm looking, here we are.
Table tennis. Table tennis, also known as ping pong, was invented as a parlour game in England in the 1880s and has since become the most popular racket sport in the world.
So, children just spend hours and hours exploring these things. It's designed for very small children, very young children. It's got some facts and other things in it, but this isn't a product demo. But the three things that I wanted to pull out there, I suppose, are three examples of how one tries to use this medium to go beyond the printed page and to do stuff that engages imagination. I'll switch back to, actually, I'll just show you one other title swiftly, which is Michael Morpurgo's Warhorse, which is a title we produced in partnership with Egmont. And at its heart is a performance.
It was important that I should not allow this horse to get ahead. We were racing each other. It was all our riders could do to bring us to a halt. I'm telling you, Jamie, said a breathless Captain Nichols, If we had gone on much longer, your top thorn would have been struggling to keep up. You can't deny it. On the way back to the barracks, as the two officers debated the merits of their respective horses, Topthorn and I plodded along, shoulder to shoulder. We were stabled beside each other that night, and again on the ship the next day, the ship that was to carry us to France and to war.
Goodbye, Dolly, I must leave you.
I'll stop it there, but you can see that Michael is an extraordinary, unusual storyteller, and we specially filmed him performing an hour and a half long version of the novel to a family audience with lots of children there. And he's very emotional and engaging. A couple of musicians there from the very successful stage production of Warhorse helped to punctuate and bring it alive. If I now take you to the timeline, this is a very rich expansion of the book that we've done because the book is chronological, pretty much following the 5 years of the First World War and the period leading up to it. And so what we've done is created a set of resources for children motivated by the story and by Michael's storytelling who want to dive into the history. And we have touch press trademark rotations of old bullets and also series of photographs and original documents. Here's a series of photographs, all with captions and so on. So it's a pretty good resource for anyone wanting to study the First World War. And of course, the centenary is coming up in 2014 at the start of the First World War. So that's a pretty rich resource. And then the thing that I'm most pleased about in this title, I think, is the way we've tackled the hoary old talking head. And we filmed interviews with a number of people who are expert about the First World War. And the way they're put in here, I think, is rather nice. You have their interviews broken down into subject areas. You have a bit of a biography about them, and if you choose one of the subjects...
Trenches were dug for safety, because very soon it was discovered that the power of the artillery was...
I'm going to stop him there, because what I can do while he's talking is actually, as a reader, I can study the images and the pictures that are there. And so I'm not handing my mind over to the tyranny of the TV producer. I'm using the video when I want it.
And the only way was to dig in underground. And that's how it started. And as soon as you got out of the trench, there was also the danger of the machine gun, which was the other big lethal weapon.
So you can see it's a much more interactive way of consuming television and trying to get away from that, as I say, the tyranny of the linear. I've got a photograph here, and I'd be interested to see if many people recognize it, who have seen it before. It's St. Peter's Square in 2005, and it's the inauguration of the last Pope but one, the one who resigned. And you can see in the very bottom right-hand corner, someone's taking a photograph with a razor phone. But essentially, that's a crowd very engaged with an event, and they're all looking at it. And the interesting thing is to compare it with 2013. And I think that picture superbly illustrates the world that we're in and how much it's changing. And I think not just because people there have got cameras that they're using to take pictures, but for two other really important reasons. One, most of the people there are sharing those photos and they're sending them to other people. And thirdly, they are not looking directly at the event that's going on. They are mediated through some portable device. And we are in a spinning, accelerating helter-skelter of stuff that's changing the way we experience the world. And I think the people in this room have a really, really important part to play in making sure that what we do is good and not evil. So in the spirit that I hope what we're doing with our music projects is good, I'd like to show you a bit of Beethoven's Ninth. Before that, I'm going to show you the title we produced with the Philharmonia Orchestra last Christmas, called The Orchestra. And it's our first exploration of classical music. And I think this is a subject that's just really, really well fitted to the iPad in particular. So I've got 8 pieces of music I can choose from at the top, and I've also got the instruments of the orchestra. So this is a sort of periodic table of instruments, I suppose. So I'm going to choose the most expensive one, which is the double bass. I know exactly how much it cost because when Theo hung it up on a very small bit of black fishing wire to do this rotation, the owner said, "You know that's worth $250,000, don't you?" Anyway, we have rotations for everything, and we've also got people talking about their instruments. Let's choose the French horn because she's fun.
Hello, my name is Katie and I play the French horn in the Philharmonia Orchestra. I'm one of the 2 principal horns they have there. So I'm going to talk to you for a short while about the horn. A couple of the fundamentals are the same as the other brass instruments in that we buzz our lips, like that, down the mouthpiece.
There's a bit of text about each instrument, and we also have a keyboard with samples of the actual Philharmonia instruments. So I'm playing the keyboard at the bottom, so you can hear it going. And then we also have examples of where the instrument is used in the performance. And in fact, let's dive into that and go back to the home screen and let's choose Berlioz. Now this is really the heart of the app. I'll start with 4 screens up. So we spent an amazing, manic 15-hour day filming the Philharmonia Orchestra performing all 8 of the pieces we have on 12 cameras and with 24 microphones. And so this is all happening in parallel. You have to sort of watch me a bit, but I'm going to squeeze on Esa-Pekka. And you notice the score at the bottom. And I can put my finger on the score, move it backwards and forwards, and catch up at any time. I can also, if I want, have the full musical score. So if I scroll down, that's every single instrument playing. All in real time. Richard Zito, who coded this. I can have a simplified score. So that's all the instruments. But this, I think, is the most interesting visualization. This is what we call the beat map. So that's every note driving graphically every single graphic representation. And if I go back, you can see it keeps up as I move left and right. What I'm now going to do is put my finger on top of the graphic and move it round, and you have to listen to what goes on. So now I'm on the trumpets. Now I'm just on the timpani, horns, so that's orchestra. There's a lot more to it as well, actually, I've forgotten. But this is what we brought out last Thursday after an enormous amount of struggle with the design. But I think we got there in the end. And we were criticised a bit for orchestra because we don't have full pieces. It's already nearly 2 gigs, and we couldn't get 8 pieces of full music. So this remedies the situation by providing the whole of Beethoven's Ninth, and in fact not just with 1 recording of Beethoven's Ninth, but with 4 of the greatest recordings of Beethoven's Ninth from Deutsche Grammophon's library. It's also got a bunch of interview material.
In this particular piece, I don't think it's supposed to be comfortable. We are, after all, dealing with the weightiest matters. And then at the end, there is a time, it seems to me, in the music, there is a time relationship written into the music. And I only know one conductor who does what I think that the music says. And the result is this. It is just fascinating. At the end, he says prestissimo, very fast. And it could be 1 beat in a bar. Yeah? Can be that. But to do that, what the
I just love listening to something. Anyway, so if we dive into the music, you'll recognize the thing doesn't fall out. Now this time we've got a changing commentary. So let me go to a bit of the music. This is the Bernstein recording, 1979. And watch the commentary, the line underneath the video. Now I'm going to pause it there, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to one of the other recordings and listen, because one of them has a key that's about 1/4 of a semitone lower because it uses old instruments, and you can actually hear. And when you're watching this, remember that these 4 recordings are all completely different lengths. One is 60 minutes, one is 65, one is 70. And what you can do here, because you know the semantic structure of the music, is we can change on the fly anywhere at any point seamlessly between the recordings. So it's quite interesting. I think just the act of looking at that beat map while you're listening to the music teaches you about the structure of music, because you suddenly realize what the different instruments are playing at different times. So I think it's a way into the world. I think if we think about the challenge we face in trying to design things that open the eyes of children. That's what we should be doing. I'm going to finish. I just thought it might be interesting to talk briefly about the commercial model of Beethoven's Ninth, because we've released this title for the first time in Touch Press's history as a freemium, a free app. It can be downloaded both for iPhone and for iPad for nothing. And you get all the features you've just seen, but you only have 2 minutes. So just when the choir is about to open your mouth, an upsell in-app purchase dialogue comes up. And it's a huge experiment for us. It's going to be really, really interesting to see if it works. We've tried it because of this graph. This is an experiment we did in January. And at the top, in orange, you can see sales of the elements through January. And 3 years after launch, we've achieved that blissful state of between 100 and 200 copies a day, just selling, great. And then on the 7th of January, we woke up one morning and logged on to iTunes Connect, and suddenly all our sales had disappeared. Because this is exactly the same date period. I've just added 3 days. And there should be these orange things all the way right the way along. And they're gone. So I thought there's a bug. But actually there isn't a bug. It's just that they're too small to show. Because on these, this day, which was the promotion, but there 3 days, we gave away the elements free for a day as part of Apple's 12 Days of Christmas promotion in Japan. And so for 24 hours in Japan, the elements was downloaded 24 shy of 500,000 times. That's 0.73 petabytes of data that Apple delivered. So I'm glad I wasn't paying the bandwidth bill at that point, because that's 2 gigs times 500,000. So clearly, our high price point, combined with Apple's excellent promotion, is a barrier to entry. So hence the interest in seeing whether we can get more people to see our titles by giving them away free with the 2 minutes, and then hopefully, having seen all the things that they'll get, and doing the equation, if you just wanted to buy those 4 recordings from Deutsche Grammophon, our partners in the project, that would cost you $30. So given that it's all combined together, and we've got the full score, and I didn't show you Beethoven's 1825 manuscript that turns page by page in sync with the music, and the whole book on each passage that's there. There's a whole ton of stuff that you get, so surely people should pay $14 for something as good as that. But they may or they may not. It's an interesting experiment, and the jury's out. I can reveal that in the last 2 or 3 days we've been downloaded over 100,000 times, so it's a good start. And with that, I shall say thank you.